All right, we are live. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. I'm Michelle Histand, Executive Director of BPHL, and I'm so excited to welcome today David Thornburgh from Committee of 70, where David is the President and CEO of Committee of 70. So thanks for being with us, David.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. My pleasure, my treat.
I couldn't be more excited. I was sharing with David before we went live today that, I've gotten more interested in politics since the 2016 election, much more than I ever have been. And I think this is just such an important topic, and Philly can be a pretty confusing city. So I think having resources like Committee of 70 is incredibly important. So maybe start by telling us what you do.
Sure. Well, let me take people through in the Wayback Machine to our origins, because I think that's helpful. We were founded 116 years ago by a group of business and civic leaders, all the names of the day, Wanamaker, etc., who were very interested in improving the way our local democracy worked. Let's just say that Philadelphia 100 years ago, our politics were fierce, intense, nasty. There was actual voter intimidation, often carried out by police forces, interestingly, at polls. So I think these community leaders said, this is not good for our future. It's not good for our economy. It's not good for business. And here, particularly in Philadelphia, we need to do better. So that's been the spirit that motivated. We are probably one of the oldest, if not the oldest, so-called good government groups in the country. So we enjoy that distinction. And over the years, we've tried to focus on a core issue of educating citizens and educating voters. We firmly believe that this whole democracy thing works if more people participate and they're better informed, but also arguing for and advocating for reforms to improve the way government works, to make it more accountable, transparent, accessible, to make sure that, everyone who chooses to participate gets a fair shot at doing so. So we issues about, putting checks on money in politics and limiting campaign contributions, strengthening our board of ethics here in Philadelphia. And, you said it at the outset, but this is, we've got an extraordinary election season in front of us right now, and we'll talk more about that, but probably like one we've never seen in this country and in Philadelphia in our 116 years.
Yeah, I know, and that's one of the reasons I'm so excited to have you. It really is an unbelievable year, and I think more, not just me, but I think more people than ever are getting really involved and wrapped up, which is a good thing, right, overall. So, with it being a big year for voting and at the same time being in the midst of a pandemic, I'm just wondering what kind of changes you've already seen happening to the process. And I think worth mentioning that we just had the primaries in Pennsylvania. Was it 2 weeks ago? All the weeks are blending together. I don't know if it was last week or the week before.
Tuesday, so not even 2 weeks yet.
Oh my gosh, not even. Okay. It's all kind of blending together. So what kind of changes have you seen as a result of the pandemic, and maybe with that, in particular as it relates to the primaries that just happened?
Sure. Well, massive change. I mean, we voted on June 2nd in a way that we've never voted before, primarily because about half of the votes cast in Philadelphia were cast with mail ballots, which was a new power that voters gained because of an act of the General Assembly last fall, long before the pandemic was on anybody's consciousness. So we had this new ability, and again, that resulted in about 160,000 mail votes cast in the city of Philadelphia, about half the votes. And by contrast, in years past, maybe only 3-4% of people voted by mail.
Wow.
I said to people, all of a sudden, our election apparatus turned into essentially a mail house.
Right.
You're trying to process applications for mail ballots. You're processing the ballots when they come in. They are still counting them as we speak, which is what we're got to work on.
Crazy, yeah.
By the way, on the in-person voting side, in Philadelphia, because of health reasons and the pandemic, we consolidated the number of polling locations from about 800 to about 200. So all of a sudden, if you've been living in Philadelphia for 20 years and you're used to voting at the same church same senior center. All of a sudden, sorry, going somewhere else. So that also leads to a massive challenge in educating voters about just the basics. Where do I vote? How do I vote? What happens to my mail ballot and so forth. So and despite all that, turnout in Philadelphia was pretty good, somewhere around 30%, which doesn't sound earth-shaking, but compared to past elections was pretty good. We have to take all of that, though, as kind of a little bit of a dress rehearsal for the fall.
Yeah.
So, both on all fronts, improving the process, educating voters, making sure that we can run a foolproof election in the fall, is an order of magnitude challenge like we've never seen before.
I love the term dress rehearsal. I wonder how much what you saw in the primary. I was one of the people who walked to my old polling place and they were closed for shop, and I went, oh, okay, and jumped in the car and drove to the new one, and it worked beautifully. It was great. I got in. It was no problem. People were social distancing. It was great. I can't say enough about the volunteers that were there. It was really easy. So I hope people keep that in mind in the fall. But how will that inform what Committee of 70 does between now and the election?
Yeah, let me take a half step back because I realized I didn't really address your question, which is what were we doing in the spring? We put a massive amount of time and energy into voter education and outreach. We created a We Vote voter awareness and outreach campaign where we're working with organizations that sit on our board, Children's Hospital, Brandywine Realty Trust, banks, insurance companies, et cetera, to use their to get their help in communicating to their employees through employee newsletters or their wellness operation or anything else, the new rules of the game in Philadelphia and in the surrounding counties. A lot of emphasis on our part on this We Vote awareness campaign. And that includes the materials include a really world-class voter guide, a cool little feature where you can save your own personal ballot to your phone. So if you're a little confused about who you like to vote for and you forget, you can carry that with you to the polls, or if you're voting at home, use it at your kitchen table.
I love that.
And then we've been working closely with election officials to monitor how this election has been carried out and to do everything we can to support them going into the fall. One more plug, because it's not too late. We actually fielded a voter experience survey, which is, we think, really important to try to answer this question of how to go. And the survey's still live. We're taking responses until midnight tomorrow night, and you can find that at our website at 70.org, the word 70.org. So voter experience survey, we've had close to 2,000 responses, but, as I say to people, we mostly want to hear from you.
Yeah, I'll do it. I mean, I had a great experience and I'll do it. Right. Well, we talk a lot in the innovation process, in the work that I do in my day job, running design and innovation work. We talk a lot about the input of the people that you're designing for. And that's exactly what you're doing, right? By having a voter experience survey, that can help inform what needs to happen in advance of the fall. So I would encourage everyone watching to go take the voter experience survey, because we want the fall to be smooth, right? We want to make sure as many people as we can get to turn out.
Yeah. And I should restate this, or make sure I underline this. We're a nonpartisan organization. We're a nonprofit organization. We're not picking sides in who wins. What we want is, a world-class election, something that we're proud of. We don't want to be Georgia from 2 days ago. We don't want to be Wisconsin. We don't want there to be any doubt that on election day, when the returns are counted, that the process here in Philadelphia was foolproof, well designed, well executed, and again, something we could be proud of. Because, by the way, the consequences of not delivering that are border on the unthinkable.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you. I mean, aside from it just being a point of pride for our city, right? Like this is where it started. We are the start of all of this, and we have to do it right. So
Yep.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I appreciate all that you guys do.
Yep.
You mentioned education. I'm wondering, is that the biggest barrier that you see to voting, that people don't feel educated so they don't turn out, or do you think there are other barriers?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is actually one of the primary barriers. If you look at some of the polling that's been done, people say, I don't know enough. And
Mm-hmm.
on the one hand, you think, how could you not know enough? You're surrounded by social media and legacy media and so forth and so on. But what people mean is this is only something you do twice a year. And it is, let's just admit it, it's kind of arcane. You have to register.
Mm-hmm.
If you want a mail ballot, you have to request one. You've got to know all these little pieces of information in order to feel confident as a voter. So that's the gap that we're trying to fill. But there are other reasons. I'm persuaded that, some people say, well, my vote doesn't.
Yeah.
I just had a call come in. Um, so some people say my vote doesn't matter. Other people say it's just not who I am. I'm not a voter.
Right.
And one of the things we're trying to do is encourage a stronger culture of voting.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned the We Vote initiative. So if you say in your family, we vote on our block, we vote at our
Mm-hmm.
company, we vote. You've crossed a barrier that says this is not just about I voted one time, but
Mm-hmm.
it's actually baked into my identity. And
Yeah.
I know this about families or peer group relationships. Once something is baked into your identity, and that voice of your mother, your father, your friend, whoever says, Michelle, you're voting today, right?
Yeah.
It's very hard to resist. But that is a barrier, but it's also an opportunity that I think we're trying to work on at 70.
I love the work that you do though, because, and I do think I'd say to folks watching that you don't have to know every aspect of every piece to vote, right? And I say that because I'll out myself. I was not incredibly involved. I think it may have been the first election I voted in, may have been the 2008, which is embarrassing because I'm much older and have had the ability to vote for quite some time. But I think I was in that camp that felt like if I don't understand every aspect of a candidate, who am I to choose somebody? But I'd say it's so incredibly important, and there are so many good guides out there, and you have so much good information. I was on your site the morning of the primaries to make sure I was understanding who, I understood my top picks, but then there are all of these other offices that maybe you don't know.
That's
And
right.
yeah, so it's incredibly important. But just doing some quick reading, I can go, oh yeah, I support this person because of this, or I'm comfortable making this decision, right?
Right. And that's actually, I know you said you voted at your polling place. I voted at home, like 1.8 million Pennsylvanians.
Yeah.
There's sort of a light bulb that goes off that someone said voting at home is kind of like an open book test.
Mm.
So if you don't know what the office is or want to know more about the candidate, there's this thing called the internet, and you
That's
go on, and while you're having a cup of coffee or a drink or whatever, you can find out about that person. So it's a different experience. I know I feel like, you go to the polls sometimes and there are long lines and the person in back of you is tapping their foot. There's a little like voter anxiety. You
Yeah.
sit in there and like there are all these candidates and I don't know which one and I
Yeah.
don't get anything. So that may be a positive consequence of more people voting by mail. Just a different, more relaxed, thoughtful experience, which would not be such a bad thing for democracy, seems to me.
No, I agree. I think the more people we can get to vote, the better, right? So look at the resources, start educating yourselves, and don't feel like you have to be an expert.
Yeah.
That's kind of my top tip.
One other thing I'd say about that is, the easiest thing to do if you're a little unsure of things is to ask a friend. There's always somebody who's a little more involved, a little more knowledgeable. That's what we do about everything else. Pick a movie, pick a book, pick a new car to buy. You turn to your friend or your neighbor. So that's like the low level. Anybody can do that kind of thing. You don't have to be an expert. That's the beauty of democracy is all votes count the same. you know?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so if you're a little anxious or if you're trying to encourage your teenager to get out there and vote, just like it's kind of the Nike, just do it. Just do it. And then over time, maybe you can become the well-informed citizen that we all had in mind. But take the step, and then the rest will sort of take care of itself.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so true, and it's so important. So we're celebrating an anniversary this year. As a woman and a feminist, I am really excited about that. We're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which was, granting women's right to vote. Before lockdown, I had a chance to go see at the Kimmel Center. They had this amazing exhibit that shared some facts on, women and how far we've come and where we're in the workplace. So, and I think too, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's been a pretty big trend in women getting involved in politics, particularly since the last election, right? Lots of women getting interested and lots of younger people getting interested, which is awesome. How do we continue to support and get non-traditional candidates and more people of color and more women? How do we keep getting people that we don't typically see in these roles into these roles?
Yeah, yeah. All great questions. And I'm glad you highlighted the anniversary of the 19th Amendment. I actually read, and if you haven't read, I would recommend that there's a great book called The Woman's Hour, which is about the fight to gain the last state, the state of Tennessee, to ratify the 19th Amendment. And it is a political story,
I'm
like,
excited.
like all kinds of drama and personalities and cross currents and so forth. I mean, it's a astounding story, and it came down to one vote, and the vote was a young uh, representative who whose mother had sent him a letter saying, "Son, it's time you do the right thing."
That's amazing.
So the entire 19th Amendment hinged on that one vote in Tennessee, influenced, as is often the case, by the words from. Anyway, so that was a huge milestone, and we have made progress, but it's never fast enough. Uh, and I think it's like other kinds of shifts in our nation. It's some combination of sort of pressure from below and pressure from above. You know, and to be always conscious of the signals that we're sending to women or other folks that haven't been well represented in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And it begins with, by the way, in encouraging at a very basic person to person level women or other folks, people of color, to step up.
Yeah.
Again, that's the beauty of this process, right? Everybody's in the pool. So why not you? And the research, by the way, demonstrates that when women run, they win just as often as men do. The challenge is convincing more women to run. And, you know, we've been making headway. If you look at the congressional delegation in the Philadelphia area, we've got three newly elected women within the last couple cycles. So those sort of examples and those kinds of trailblazers make a big difference. But I know this is the Vision 2020 organization that you mentioned to have the exhibit at the Kimmel Center. Our work is not done until there's a shared sense of representation and leadership in all dimensions. That's how this country is supposed to work, and that's how we have to set our goals on it. And the one other thing I'd say, you and I talked a little bit before we got started, is get involved at a very local level. Figure out how you could be a committee person, or and run for that office, and step forward and say, I could do this job. So once you get a little taste of it, which I have to say, I have one of our daughters is she lives in Chester County and is like full bore into all of this. Is a zone leader. That's what they call their wards out there, and it's great to see particularly young folks sort of realize those kinds of opportunities. And again, it says anybody can do this.
Well, I love that. I agree. Anybody can do it, but I think it echoes so much what you said about voting, which is, if it hasn't been something that's in your family or that you've seen or is in your friend circle, it can be really intimidating. And I've heard a lot, and I believe this to be true, that women tend to wait until they think they know everything about it to make that move, whereas men are like, I can do this, I'll go do it. Not all, but a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
And that's what prevents us. And it's funny, I know I bought a lot of books on government and tried to start reading up and understanding, but I feel like I would be remiss to not mention all of the pivotal work happening right now as we speak, and I think maybe the 12th day of protests in the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think it's a similar concept, right? We want to have more people of color in government helping to make that change and helping make those moves.
Yep.
So, I would say, as somebody who lives here in the city, I think Philadelphia can be particularly confusing. We have wards and districts, and just trying to wrap your head around where you even sit is tough.
Yeah.
So can you talk about how can somebody who wants to get engaged in politics, who does not have that background, what are the best resources, whether they're on your site, talk about that, or other places that folks should be looking for information?
Sure. Yeah, we do try to be sort of a guide to the forest for people that want to make their way into it. So we mentioned running for committee person. We've got a pretty good little how-to on that. We've also got a good map of the wards and divisions in the city of Philadelphia, so you can figure out where you are. Understanding like which ward and division you live in is not like, people don't know that. So
No, they don't.
itself is, can be kind of intimidating. And then, we also, there's another site that a website that we run called Philly Ward Leaders, which has the names and contact information and some basic data about all the wards, the 66 wards in Philadelphia. So that's a good place to start. But I guess it's, again, to get started on the ground floor is not as intimidating as you might think it is. There's signature requirements. You have to make sure you follow the process and meet the deadlines and so forth and so on. But you invest a little bit of time in figuring out how this works and how you can get involved, and then off you go. But don't be afraid to sort of take the first step. And to your point earlier, it's like you don't have to know everything there is to know about everything. A lot of this is, I think, a basic quality of any elected official is just the willingness to ask questions and learn as you go. I'll take that anytime over somebody who shows up that says, I got all the answers already.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And yeah, so anybody can get involved. I figured out what my ward and district was from your map. So it works very well. It's very easy to use. So I would encourage folks to go to the site and check it out if you're trying to figure that out, or if you're just looking for other resources. So, we're all in our homes, and we've talked about the voting at home process, but I know when I think about committee people, their job is to be out knocking on doors and to educate people. What are some creative ways we can build civic engagement from afar? What are the things that we can be doing to make sure, even those of us who aren't committee people, but maybe want to make sure that we do our part to get people engaged in the election in the fall, the presidential election? What are some things we can do to build that engagement?
Yeah, that's a great question, because, all of a sudden we found ourselves without all of the usual touch points or the usual practices, whether you're running for office or just trying to organize your neighborhood to have a block party.
Right.
On the other hand, you still have neighbors. You can reach over the fence and ask how they are, and is there anything we can do for them? It's interesting. Our next door neighbors inadvertently landed a Frisbee in our yard last night. And wife sent us a text sort of like, can you send us the Frisbee back? So that opened a little exchange about how everybody's doing, and let us know if we can help and so forth. So again, the little touches, the little gestures can make a big difference. That, I think, is how you build community. It's fascinating too, because maybe we get stir crazy. There are more people out walking around, with masks and adequate distance and so forth. But there's more, and more people working at home. So there's sort of more ability to just engage in those quick little neighborly chats that maybe we didn't practice as often because we were all rushing from home to job to pick
Yeah.
up kids at daycare or whatever. So, I think we got to take advantage of those. There's obviously challenging times, but there may be, some silver lining in those kinds of responses. And then I think, we're all getting a lot more comfortable with and exploiting the powers of these online communities that we have. Witness what we're doing now. And it's really cool to be able to learn things and to learn about people and ideas and practices in a way that we just couldn't have imagined a few years ago. And it's all become accessible and personal. And so, not perfect, technology way, and the dog barks every once in a while. You at least want the dog to bark, but I'm just struck by how much power of connection that's revealed.
Yeah, I love that. That's incredible. And I would say my team at Independence Blue Cross, it's my day job. We run idea sessions for a living. If anyone watching wants to jump on an idea session and figure out ways to engage their neighbors in the voting process, we would be really happy to run that process because, I'm thinking like my kids are home and bored. I'm going to get them to make some flyers that we can drop into our neighbors' mailboxes when it comes time in the fall. Start just engaging your neighbors, like you said. Yeah, we have a big stoop culture in South Philly too. So we'll get out on our stoops and call to each other down the way to make sure everybody knows where to go to vote if they're not set up for mail-in ballots. So,
Makes a difference.
Yeah, it really does. So, what are you most looking forward to after quarantine, whether it has to do with voting or not?
Yeah, well, like a lot of folks, it's I'm missing my family. My parents are in their 80s and living in Pittsburgh. I haven't seen them since January. We talk a lot, but just to be able to, if not to give them a hug, just to see them and feel their presence. We have a daughter out in Los Angeles that we haven't seen since February, and that's tough. So just trying to reestablish those human connections. And then probably like a lot of folks now that it's summer, I think we're feeling even a little more stir crazy because, not feeling confident that we could, head to the beach or we had, grand travel plans, which are all of a sudden, readjusted. You don't, when you've had the ability to travel and meet people and see family and so forth from here and there, and then all of a sudden it's taken away. That's tough. But I have to say, I am, maybe I'm the eternal optimist, or else I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But I'm struck by the positive community building responses to this whole pandemic and the economic dislocations and so forth. I think people are resilient and tough, and we're social beings, and we actually do look after each other, not just ourselves. So we'll get through this. I made my wife watch the 4-part documentary on 1968. A little.
Okay. Uh-oh.
Sorry.
No
Which I
worries.
know way too young to have experienced, but I was a little kid then, and those were some very, very, very tough years. I mean, the assassination of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr., the Vietnam War, the protests, the Chicago riots during the convention, and we made it through, and we rebuilt on top of that. So I know that we can do this again as a nation and as a city.
That's awesome. I appreciate the hope. I too am an eternal optimist, and you're right. I mean, there's no doubt that, man, if Philly has anything, we have grit. So and that goes across the nation, but certainly in Philadelphia. So David Thornburgh, thank you so much. Let me give the audience watching a couple of takeaways. So one is go to 70.org and take the voter experience survey. That's until midnight tomorrow night. So everyone watching, make sure you do that if you're here in the city or in the area. And then also go to the website for more information, right? Like educate yourselves, start getting more involved. It's really easy to just get started and take that first step. And now we're home and maybe have a little more time. You don't have to, plan to write a novel or do anything grand. Just educate yourself a little bit more about your local politics. And that's something that everybody can do. Anything else you want to share with folks watching?
No, Michelle, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate the invitation, and I love your energy.
I love the work you guys do. Like I said, I am becoming a little bit of a political junkie, not as much as my husband maybe, but I'm getting there. And so it's amazing to hear from you and just to hear ways that we can all get engaged. So thank you so much.
We call it being a democracy nerd.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
If that's a title you want to wear proudly while you're
I'll take it. I'll get that tattoo. I'm there. I really love that. David, thank you so much. And bye to everybody watching. Go check out 70.org, and we'll see you guys next time.
Great. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks.